Welcome. This is Model Builder, the need to build an adaptation, profiles, changes, and extensions. A quick clips video resource for SDSFIE training. This training resource is designed for all users who want to learn about applying requirements for an SDSFIE vector adaptation relative to a parent model prior to using the Model Builder tool. There are two prerequisites for this webinar. The Understanding the Vector Standard video, which explains the model element hierarchy and also walks through the adaptation process. The latter diagram is also covered in the Model Builder, the Model Development Process and Available Options, Quick Clips video, which is the first in this series of shorter videos on creating models, and important to watch prior to this video. The overall goal for our training resources is that all SDSFIE users understand the purpose, structure, and parts of the SDSFIE family of standards or standards framework and how to implement those standards. The specific objectives for this presentation are that the audience gains an understanding of the following: how defined model requirements are applied in an SDSFIE-V adaptation at an elemental level, how these requirements relate to a parent model and the profile, extend, and change actions, and how modeling rules dictate harmonization with the parent and other approved models in the Portal Registry, particularly for extensions. We will now step through an example adaptation by a DoD component, focusing on the profile, extend, and change actions that are applied to fulfill elemental level requirements. Once the model requirements are defined, the first step is to select the parent model. For this example, the Gold 4.0.5 Core Agenda model will be adapted. We now examine requirements and work down through the model element hierarchy, starting with the feature datasets and feature types. The first element requirement is for an installation feature type. Because it is present in the parent model, in a form to which no modifications are needed, no action needs to be applied. By not taking a profile, extend, or change action, the installation feature type is maintained in the component adaptation. Next, a transportation feature dataset not found in the parent model is required and is thus extended. As shown, the road center line, sign inventory data, and sign entities will be contained within this feature dataset. For each of these entities, the property defining a feature dataset model location will need to be specified. Next, consider the road center line entity. It is required and exists in the parent model, so it should not be profiled and does not need to be extended. There is a requirement to modify the alias name, so a change action is needed. Now, note the road path entity in the parent. It is not required in the adaptation and therefore can be profiled. Although not shown here, there are a total of 259 entities in the parent model. As shown, only 3 of these are retained: installation, road center line, and sign. So, along with road path, a total of 256 entities from the parent will be profiled. Those actions are omitted for simplification of this example. Not yet mentioned is the requirement for a sign inventory data entity. Given that this entity concept is not present in the Gold parent, it must be extended. The SDSFIE Vector Implementation Guidance, or SFIG document, holds that before extending a seemingly brand new element, the HQ models of other components must be checked for any existing entity that matched the proposed concept. If a match exists, that existing entity should form the basis for the extension. As mentioned, the sign entity is required, and so will be maintained from the parent model. We will next look at its attribute requirements. Here we see requirements for 3 attributes. Note that these are in addition to standard foundational attributes like feature name and metadata ID, and standard real property attributes like RPUID and RPSUID. Sign text is the first required attribute. It needs the addition of a note, so this attribute needs a change action from its parent form. The next attribute listed is RPNID, which is not required, so will be profiled from the parent. Operational status is the next required attribute. It is not found attached to the sign entity in the parent model. Thus, it needs to be extended. Under modeling rules in the 5.0 SFIE-V, attributes have three unique properties: model name, alias, definition, and a fourth, data type, that cannot be changed among its instances. Given that an attribute named operational status exists in the parent model, an attribute with its names, definition, and data type property values must be used in the adaptation. Sign type is the last attribute to be considered. It is required, and it exists in a suitable form in the parent, so no action is required to maintain this attribute in the adaptation. In the parent, sign type is constrained by the sign primary type, and no change to this property is required in the adaptation. Note that the sign primary type enumeration contains 13 enumerants. Only 3 of those are considered here for the sake of brevity. The first enumerant to be considered is boundary, for which the parent form meets the adaptation requirements. The second enumerant is school, which is not required in the proposed adaptation. The third is advertisement, which is not in the parent model and thus must be extended. Because gold enumerations are shared among components, the SFIE-V holds any extended enumerant concept must be mutually exclusive with all existing enumerants. This proposed advertisement enumerant passes that test and will thus be extended. Note that an entry into the change management process is required to document this change to the next version of the gold model. Last is the TBD enumerant, which is generally required for list enumerations and is needed in the adaptation, and thus will be maintained from the parent. This type of comparison between the adaptation requirements and existing gold elements is a fundamental step in the model development process. As we will see in the next 2 videos in this series, these decisions about elemental level actions to profile, extend, change, or maintain as is will be used directly to populate an adaptation submission workbook, or ASW. This concludes the model builder, the need to build an adaptation, profiles, changes, and extensions presentation, a quick clips video training resource. The next 2 videos in this series on Model Builder are listed here. If you want a more comprehensive training video on Model Builder, see the first background resource listed here. All these and videos on other in-depth topics and background content are available from the training resources page at the URL shown. Thank you for your interest in SDSFIE.